then.
Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Well, hello and welcome to Aggressive Negotiations as we're coming at you live from the Galaxy's Fair here on Coruscant. It is just so exciting to be back. The sights and the sounds, the flashlight popsicles, and just delicious. Anyway, I'm just one of your hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and with me as he is every single episode, the one, the only, the brilliant, my friend, Jedi Master John Mills.
Thank you for such high praise, Jedi Master Rushing. And let me just say that it's absolutely wonderful that even in this age of digital set extensions and the volume, that we can find ways to reuse sets to save a couple of bucks here and there. So that's always good. That's always good. Really, really like that we can do that, make the most of those server farms.
It is wonderful. Before we dive in, of course, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, and that way you'll get the show as soon as it comes out. You can also do us a huge favor by sharing us with friends over on social media. You'll find us on X, Twitter, at The Jedi Masters, the entire network, at Join Nerd Party. You also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party. We're on Instagram at The Nerd Party. Or on Instagram at The Nerd Party. And, of course, you've got the nerdparty.com where you can find all of the different shows that are happening. And while you're sharing us and recommending us to your friends, which we would love if you would do, please give us a star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts. It help people find the show. Honestly, we got a new review a few weeks ago, and it made our numbers jump. And so when you give us reviews, it helps the show grow. That this is not a joke. This is actually true. And so you can help us find more people. If you like what we do, help people know what it is that we do. We would love to be able to reach more Star Wars fans out there. But, John, we are getting ready for The Mandalorian and Grogu. The film is coming out here in just a month. In fact, in a month from today, basically, it'll already be out. And so we've been walking through all the episodes that we hadn't talked about yet. And we're in season 3 at this point. And we have reached the episode, The Convert. And so first I wanted to just ask you, how do you feel like this episode starts? Because this one actually legitimately picks up right where we left off in the previous episode. And so I wanted to see how you thought this episode did like that. Because we don't get that a ton in The Mandalorian, where there's like this direct continuity that like we just literally picked up seconds after we left off the previous episode.
Well, I love the way it starts because it picks up right where it left off. And I think we get an absolutely magnificent battle sequence to start it off. That was really great. I love the photography in it. I love the effects in it. I thought it was a thrilling way to start everything. I also thought that it felt like it was more the resolution to the previous episode. It speaks to some of the story editing that has irked us already by this point in the season. Like at the end of the first episode, we're like, this really feels like the beginning of the second episode. That's the ending here where he's seeing Bo Katan. And so things have now, we're 3 episodes in, and for the second time, it feels like things got chopped off in an odd spot. Like they couldn't decide how to end and start the next episodes. And they were like, you know what, we'll split this scene in half. And I admire, in one sense, the commitment to keeping it like the serials that obviously inspired Star Wars, but it's not a clean cut. And that's where I come with it. So love the opening, but it's not a clean break to have the way the previous one ended and this one begin. It doesn't feel, it feels a little messy. I don't know if you feel the same way.
I would say that the way that it opens, is just incredibly exciting. The space battle then down into an aerial battle on the planet, and whizzing through all of these canyons on this planet here that Bo Katan's castle is on. I mean, not only does it look fantastic, but it's incredibly well shot and it's very exciting. And all of that is great in that sense. And I think I do get what you're saying, where it's like it almost feels as though this is a holdover from the previous episode. And yet, I think the thing about this is that it's so incredibly exciting, and yet I guess we just have to start talking about it. All of a sudden, this is might be the gear shift of all gear shifts in an episode. I mean, if you're not having whiplash, if you don't feel like you need traction after this episode, I don't know. Apparently, you weren't really paying attention, because all of a sudden we just shift to Coruscant in this storyline with Doctor Pershing and what's her freaking name?
Kane.
And Kane, who are a part of this supposed, or at least supposedly a part of this New Republic reclamation project for people who were once in the Empire and now are serving the New Republic. And I don't know, man. It's the beginning to me is incredibly strong, and even though I can sense that there's kind of a little bit almost like a holdover, it feels like, and maybe you should have just had this as part of the previous episode, and then maybe just have this whole episode, be this story. I don't know, but I think by not finding a way to edit better to make these two things feel more like they're connected, it's one of the oddest things that I've ever seen in Star Wars storytelling. Yes,
I think that the gear shift is bizarre, and I think actually it explains why they break it up weirdly, is because if they just started on Coruscant, everybody would say, what the heck is going on? Because they basically bracket this story. You know what they do to the Mandalorian here is they do to the Mandalorian what they did to the Book of Boba Fett, which is they suddenly insert this story in an episode that has nothing to do with why you're watching the show. And you go, oh, wait, okay. Now, in Book of Boba Fett, you meet Luke training Grogu, and the Mandalorian goes to get him, and Ahsoka is there. So it's like, you don't mind it as much because you're like, okay, I want more of this anyway.
Yeah. Because you care about the story and the characters.
But the thing is, I care about this idea of the Republic working to assimilate Imperials back, and I see a lot of story potential with that. The problem is that I think this episode is yet again an instance of them trying to figure out how to make plot lines from Rangers of the New Republic happen without having Rangers of the New Republic. You're having a storyline that has to do with the dysfunction of the Republic and the bureaucracy and the difficulty of ruling afterward. All very interesting things, but nothing that directly relates to the Mandalorian, in the sense that if you took this single episode and you chopped these things up, these bits, and sprinkled them through several episodes, cut away, have a parallel storyline, and then figure out a way to make them directly relatable to each other, then you have a B storyline that works and goes for more than one episode. Diverting and going to that B plot line and never cutting away from it, never leaving it, is a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake. So while I like what they do with Dr. Pershing, up to and including the fact when I watched this with my kid, even she picked up when he did his earlobe thing, when he's considering, he gives it during the speech, and she picked up on it being a nervous tick of his. She goes, oh, he's doing his earlobe thing. He's having a problem. I'm like, that There you go. Visual language is working here. But it's just it's from a baseline perspective of, I look at this show in a bottle and I say I have a Mandalorian scene at the beginning and a Mandalorian scene at the end, and then a different show in between. It's a weird sandwich.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great way to put it. It's like, expecting a pastrami sandwich and then all of a sudden somebody giving you like bologna. It's just like,
well,
it's
right.
It's and I like what you said, because this is not an uninteresting story, and it's not something that doesn't connect with things later on in the season. I think that you're exactly right, is that they have become so beholden to the idea that the show has to have a certain structure that they're hamstringing themselves to try and fit into that structure. And I think you're right too. They could possibly be doing so because they're feeling like they have to add bits of story in that are going to fill in things, all over the place, where it would have been possibly in another show. So this would have made more sense. I love your idea. And from the moment this season was airing originally, I felt the exact same thing, that if you were just to begin to tell this story more like they do, say, Andor, right? Where it's all these interconnecting stories and they're all related to one another, but they're all playing parallel until they meet at some point in the season. That's what needed to be happening in this season. And there's nothing wrong with that, because the show itself is moving into a much larger world, right? We are expanding as this show, which once was just about Grogu and Mando. But it's expanded now to include all sorts of different characters in the larger framework of the Star Wars galaxy and what's happening. I think it would have been great if they would have just expanded their own thought process on how this show was presented, and been okay with, we're getting into being even more serialized than we have been before, and that's okay, because that's the story that we're telling. And I feel like we talk about this all the time, but it just feels like all of these streaming shows are just afraid to actually be free of the constraints of television, in the sense of like, we've got to be this many minutes, we got to have this many commercial breaks, that the episodes all have to be this long, the structure of storytelling has to be like this. Like, no, you don't have to do any of that. The only constraints are the ones you're putting on yourselves, and a lot of times it feels like they're unnecessary. They're unnecessary constraints.
But the thing is, I want to ask you, because justifiably, we're pointing out all of these flaws. I got to know, okay, just looking at the Doctor Pershing episode, that part of the episode, that core, what does work for you? What do you like? When you think back on that specific storyline, what is it that you look at and you say, you know what, I'm kind of glad, as many problems as I have with it, I'm glad I saw this, or I'm glad that this happened, or, at least I knew how Dr. Pershing wound up. Like, what do you walk away with from that part of it?
I think the good thing is the stuff that you had mentioned earlier. Just the storyline in general. We're seeing the cracks in the New Republic already, handling this incorrectly. The fact that they're just dismantling their own fleet at this point is just ridiculous, when, there are still all of these Imperial warlords, on the periphery, looking to cause havoc. We've also already seen, this season and the end of last season, where the New Republic is having a hard time patrolling these sectors because they don't have enough ships and stuff. So it's just like the short-sightedness of the New Republic is completely on display here, and I think that's great. And so I really like all of that. And I think again, just like you mentioned, the storyline for Dr. Pershing and what's going on in the New Republic is fascinating here. The problem is that for me, as much as I like all that, it's so shortchanged by being so truncated into this like 20-minute section of a 30-minute episode that it doesn't feel like I have enough time to be able to really experience what they're trying to have me experience.
But you know what also would have made it better and would have made it feel more related to the main storyline is if you had Dr. Pershing have some sort of small memento, a picture, anything, whatever you want the memento to be, piece of cloth that's identifiably related to Grogu, showing him thinking about Grogu, establishing that what's under his skin is he still feels guilt about Grogu, and he felt he was helping the galaxy with that, like showing that misguided scientist sort of thing where he doesn't understand what he was doing was terrible. And that's why he's easy to manipulate. It's not just that he's pining away for when things were better and he could do his science. It's that we have a physical representation. I think if you add that element in, it works so well because then you still feel like it's rooted to Grogu. That's what's missing. Is we know he worked with, the client, and he had history with Grogu and everything like that, and he didn't want anything bad to happen to Grogu. I think if you had just a little flair like that, it would have made every problem I have with the episode go away. Honestly, I would have had no qualm with it because I would have had that reminder in each scene. Oh, yes, this has everything to do with what Moff Gideon was trying to do, which was tied to Grogu. And we're finding out more about what happened to Grogu and what they were trying to do to Grogu. I would also think that it would have been interesting to have had, and you'll forgive me, I always forget his name, the pilot who goes and pleads the case on Coruscant to Tim Meadows.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, please forgive me. I always forget his name. I can't help it. I'm not great with some of the side names and everything like that because I love the character. But I would have loved, and you know that this is an idea that I had years and years ago. So I would have loved some sort of sop to either the pilot or anybody else having an argument in that office saying, why are we even taking the Star Destroyers apart? We could be using them to keep the peace until we're a little more stable. We don't have to build new ships. We don't have to leave ourselves exposed, and have that argument with somebody saying, no, the symbol of the Star Destroyer is terrible. And somebody's like, no, just repaint them. And so when they go to the Star Destroyer, we're thinking in those terms of like, well, yeah, is this practical? Would I have just reused the ships and just carried that over and said I repainted them with blue so that people know they're good Star Destroyers? That's like, that sets up interesting things. You insert something like that. And I know there may be somebody who loved this episode who's listening and saying, stop trying to rewrite the episode. But I'm just saying little flourishes like that make the episode work better in my mind. And I'm not even changing what they're talking about. I'm making little tiny additions that I think would have made the episode feel like more of the story that we're here for.
Yeah, I think your idea, I looked it up. His name is Carson Teva. And, I think having him in the episode would have been really, really interesting. I think it would have been beneficial. And again, I think, if you had made this whole episode about, again, pulling him in would have been a perfect way to have this whole episode be about stuff that's connected to what's happening on the Outer Rim, but pulling it in and saying, again, as we're getting larger, we're expanding the scope of the story here for The Mandalorian. You could have really made this make sense. As you were talking about earlier, it's like, oh man, if you just did this episode, it's all on Coruscant. It's like, there is a way to do that and completely tie it into everything that's going on, and also help create the exasperation of somebody like Teva, who's on the front lines. And all of that, I think, him and Trapper Wolf, who's Dave Filoni's character. It's like you have them there before the council, with Mon Mothma and the rest. You could really make this really, really interesting, and then have that connected with what's going on with Pershing. But again, I think, when you have everything be so confined, the frustrating part about this is that what they're doing with the New Republic, although interesting, feels so like unexplained to you. Is like, why would anybody be making these decisions in this New Republic at all? Because there's not enough context, And that's the thing that's really needed, I think, in this episode, is more context as to why these things are happening.
But I think that is skittishness, whether it's from on high or what have you. I think that is skittishness to bring in, quote unquote, the politics that certain segments of viewers, fan base, whatever, were so vocally rejecting about the prequels. I think that creates a skittishness to provide the context you're talking about, at least in greater quantity. And I think that winds up affecting it, because what you're talking about is inserting the exact stuff that was in the prequels, of seeing the larger arguments in the Senate and those sorts of things, which plenty of people would say, oh, that's not why I tune into Star Wars. And it's, I don't know, it is why I tune into Star Wars, but hey, I want to say that my least favorite thing about the entire Coruscant arc is that's in this episode is those glowing popsicles. Because I think those glowing popsicles could have been done so well as a practical effect by just having a damn light bulb inside like a glass or ice thing, instead of trying to do it in post. I thought it was just such an odd choice the way they decided to do it, because you can always tell when somebody is consuming something that's not truly there, and it always annoys me. Of course, watch somebody come in and say, well, it actually was on set, but no, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like I'm not, hallucinating. Like I looked at that thing and I was like, even rewatching it, I was like, man, there was a practical on-set way they could have done this that would have worked so much better. Why would you be so stubborn as to not do it? But, that's neither here nor there, but it is my least favorite part of that bit.
Yeah, I think it also doesn't help that sequence feels so of the volume in the worst of ways. And so, it never really feels like they're there. And, it doesn't help sell it. And I do want to ask you, obviously Katie O'Brien has already been a part of The Mandalorian. We've already seen her on the, Gideon's ship.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you just about her performance and whether or not you felt like she did a good job at portraying this character and has the nuances needed to really make this pop.
My problem is not at all with her performance. My problem is with how they decided to cut her scenes in. I think that she gives off the right amount of audience knows she's bad, while Pershing doesn't piece it together sort of thing. You always get the icky vibe from her. And I think she does a decent job of conveying it. Where I think she's really undercut is in the final scene, where she turns up the machine and stays there and watches. I think that would have played a lot better and been much truer to the way she played it in the rest of the episode, to walk out with the other guy and see her hand like brush on the dial, turning it up as she leaves, so that you get the impression that she's very good and very adept at making little tiny things happen. that can't really be traced back to her, and somebody says, oh my gosh, I did something wrong. So she's the ultimate saboteur sort of thing, as opposed to having her eat the biscuit, watching him suffer. It's one of those things where you're left at the end of the episode. You're like, well, okay, I guess her cover's completely blown then, because there's no way somebody's not going to piece together she did something here, which maybe is the point, but I don't know that at the end of the episode. And so it's an unsatisfying way to resolve that entire thing for me. I mean, am I way off
No,
base?
I think your comment on the end is fantastic. I think it would have been so much better if it had felt like it was an unintended accident on her part in that sense. And yet, she did it on purpose, but that there's so much more wonderful nuance to that, and again, I think there's just not enough context in the episode. And this is where I think the intercutting of storylines, you could have been so much better, in the sense that you could have told the story about her being planted there by Gideon, and all this stuff. I think that would have been much more interesting to have accomplished, and that, she's being sent there because Pershing needs to die before he gives up any secrets to the New Republic that they don't want him giving up, I think she's fine in the episode. I don't know if it's necessarily her specifically, but I do just feel like the character is underserved in the sense that the writing never allows her to play better nuance, or because in this, again, the scene when they're, at the mountaintop, there is just like the writing doesn't allow her to, I think, feel more natural in that. And I don't know if that's her or if it's just the writing. So, yeah.
I get with you on that, but okay. So, but then suddenly we get our second gear shift, head snap, whiplash thing. And we go back suddenly at the end where Bo and Din, get back to, the covert, and we have this amazing moment where we find out now suddenly Bo Katan, it's like, yeah, you haven't taken your helmet off and you were in the living waters. Guess what? Now you're a real Mandalorian by our standards too. And I think that's a crazy way to end the episode, because I remember going, oh, wow, did they really just do that? That's so cool. Did you have the same sort of oh, wow factor? Did it help alleviate? Did the strong ending help you in the moment when you watched it feel better about the episode as a whole?
I think the ending is great. I 100% agree with you. I think that the way that it ends, the implications for Bo Katan, I think even just the way that it has implications for the rest of the season. She's already mentioned this idea that Mandalorians have spent more time trying to kill each other and in their disagreements than fight their other enemies. And so, by having her become part of the covert and to be accepted by the children of the Watch, I think is phenomenal, because it does create all these wonderful story elements. It makes me feel sorry for her, because she's used to being able to take her helmet off, and now she won't be able to do that as long as she, wants to play as a Mandalorian in this covert. So I think it really is excellent. And so it is one of those things where it's like, okay, now we're back to where you have this gear shift and you're like, oh yeah, this is where I wanted to be the whole time. And so I don't know, this is such a strange episode. So how would you rate this one, do you think?
I actually give it a 2.5, because great opening, great ending, interesting middle, but nothing's connected. Now I want to be very clear that, I always mention watching with my kid. She didn't mind any of that. She didn't care. And I respect and I love that. But if I'm being honest, I gotta come out. I gotta ding it for what I would ding anything else for. Even though I might come back and rewatch it, I gotta admit there's just that glaring structural flaw that I just can't overlook.
Yeah, I mean, apparently they're fans of the song. You got to keep them separated. And so, yeah, I'm going to give this a 2 because this episode still really hits like this button with me that just makes me kind of angry because there are, I feel like, easy ways to eradicate most of the issues in the episode. And it's like they take none of them. And that's what makes me frustrated with the episode. And in all honesty, a lot of it could just come down to like editing, you know, the way that you edit the story together. So yeah, this is a, you know, of the Mandalorian episodes so far, season 1 through now, you know, part of season 3, this is the worst episode of the Mandalorian that they've done so far. Which is saying a lot because the series has been ridiculously strong up until this point. And so, for the most part, even though we had some issues with episode 1 of this season, it's like, well, in retrospect, that episode looks so much better than this one, really. You know, so it's just like...
Now, let's keep in mind, I was a little nicer with the first episode than you were.
This is true.
Because I gave the first one a 3.5. I gave the second one a 4. This one's a 2.5. So it's not a bottom out. It's not, we haven't hit rock bottom, as it were. We've hit something where I think like a 2.5, even though we're 3 episodes in, which is a substantial portion of the season, since there are only going to be 8 episodes, I don't come out of this episode like we can't save the season. I look at it as, okay, didn't really work, but maybe I'm going to like it more in retrospect as I go forward.
Yeah, so, I'm with you with that.
You know,
I mean, I think that there's some real strengths to the part of this episode that I really like. And so I don't end up thinking, oh, well, this is just like, we're sunk. There's no hope. No, I don't think that about the season because there's still some really, really interesting stuff going on that I'm excited to continue with. And so, yeah, I guess next time we'll see what happens. But John, if people wanted to catch up with you, of course, see what else you've got going on these days, where would they do that?
Well, gosh, you can find me as Kessel Junkie out there or on your social network of choice. My social networks of choice tend to be Goodreads and Letterboxd because I can only talk about books and movies, and I love both of those things, and people get less angry about those things than they do on other social media networks, so go figure. And you're also never going to encounter an AI post on either one of those, because if you do, then truly we have crossed the Rubicon and there's no coming back. You can also find me here on the network co-hosting a show called House Lights with Darren Moser and Tristan Riddell. We have a lot of fun talking about different works of directors and so on. And of course, I love being a guest over on the TFM network on the godfather of this show, which is the 602 Club, which is one of the places where people can find you, Matt. So why don't you go ahead and I gave them a little tease right there. Why don't you tell them everywhere else they can find you online?
Well, absolutely. I love hanging out in the 602 Club, talking about all those franchises we love outside of Star Trek. Of course, on the TFM network, you can also find me a lot of great Star Trek talk with my good friend Chris Jones on the social medias. You'll find me all over the place under the name Matt Rushing02. So if I'm on that network, that's my name. You also find me here on this network with a completed show called Owl Post about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. But John, they are serving medium rare Nerf steak over at the Jedi Temple tonight for dinner. So I think it's time to close these negotiations.
I agree, because I spent a lot of time herding those things, and I want to enjoy the fruits of my labor. So, Master Rushing, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.